You wake up in the pitch black, a cold wind biting at your skin while the embers of your fire slowly fade. You do not panic at all, and you definitely do not reach for a phone to check the time in the dark. For 99% of human history, waking up at 2 in the morning was not a sleep disorder, it was a crucial survival mechanism. Today, millions of people lie awake stressed about not sleeping 8 hours straight, completely unaware that their ancestors slept in 2 totally separate shifts. We are constantly told that a healthy brain requires 1 uninterrupted block of deep sleep. But this concept is actually a very modern invention. Before the Industrial Revolution and the widespread use of artificial lights, almost nobody on Earth slept in 1 single, continuous 8-hour block. To understand why your body still wakes you up at 3 in the morning, we must travel back roughly 300,000 years. Step into the prehistoric world. The exact moment the sun sets, your surrounding environment immediately transforms into a pitch black, extremely dangerous hunting ground. You are sharing this dark landscape with massive cave lions, giant hyenas, and saber-toothed cats that can see perfectly in the deep shadows. In this brutal ancient ecosystem, lying completely unconscious on the dirt for 8 uninterrupted hours was essentially a guaranteed, terrifying death sentence. Because of this extreme danger, early hominins, the direct ancestors of our species, had to develop a completely different strategy to survive the terrifying night. Their absolute first line of defense against the terrifying darkness was the campfire. But a small fire does not keep itself burning all night long. It requires constant fuel, careful attention, and someone awake enough to instantly notice if a massive predator is creeping just beyond the light. This brutal necessity gave birth to segmented sleep. Your tribe naturally divided the long night into 2 distinct and completely separate sleeping periods. And right between these 2 sleeps was a quiet, highly active hour that modern science is only just now beginning to fully understand. But before we can truly understand how your ancient ancestors managed to sleep, we must first look at the single tool that made it possible. Around 1 million years ago, a massive shift occurred in human evolution. Early hominins finally learned how to control and harness wildfire. Primatologist Richard Wrangham famously proposed the cooking hypothesis, suggesting that fire and cooked food were the exact things that made us fully human. Cooked meat provided a massive influx of easily digestible calories, which allowed our ancestors to grow the incredibly energy-hungry brains you have today. Your brain is a biological marvel, but it is deeply expensive to run, consuming about 20% of your body's daily energy output. But fire did much more than just change our diets and expand our skulls. It completely revolutionized how we interacted with the dangerous night. Before the campfire, early hominins like Australopithecus likely had to sleep high up in trees just to avoid being eaten by massive ground predators. Imagine trying to get a peaceful 8 hours of deep sleep while balancing precariously on a thin branch high above a hungry cave lion. The campfire changed everything. It created a bright, warm circle of safety on the ground, a protective boundary that wild animals were terrified to cross. Inside this glowing ring of light, your ancestors were finally safe enough to sleep on the solid earth without being instantly devoured whole. However, this magical circle of safety came with a very strict and unforgiving price tag. A fire is not a permanent, self-sustaining shield. It constantly consumes fuel. If the flames die down while the tribe is asleep, the protective barrier vanishes, and the predators will immediately strike. In the brutal prehistoric ecosystem, a dead fire was a death sentence. Someone always had to be awake, alert, and watching the dark tree line. You cannot simply leave a fire unattended for 8 straight hours. The survival of the entire community depended on constant, unbroken human vigilance. Because of this intense pressure, human biology adapted in a fascinating way, splitting our nightly rest into 2 completely separate shifts just to keep the fire alive. This strange pattern of waking up in the middle of the night is known as segmented sleep, a deeply ingrained biological rhythm. In 2001, historian Roger Ekirch published a groundbreaking study, Site 1, revealing that our ancestors did not sleep in 1 single continuous block. For hundreds of thousands of years, your ancestors experienced a first sleep that began shortly after the sun went down and darkness fell. They would sleep deeply for about 3 to 4 hours. Then, somewhere around midnight, the entire camp would naturally begin to wake up. Unlike today, waking up at 2 a.m. did not cause panic or stress. It was a completely normal and highly anticipated part of life. This middle-of-the-night awake period typically lasted for 1 to 2 full hours, and it served several absolutely critical functions for the tribe's survival. First and foremost, it allowed multiple people to easily check the dark perimeter and add fresh wood to the dying, crucial campfire. But it was also a deeply social time. People would sit by the flames, smoking meat, fixing tools, and talking with one another. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner found that nighttime conversations around the fire, Site 1, were completely different from the strict, work-focused discussions held during the day. The dark night sparked imagination. This quiet hour was meant for telling cultural myths, singing, and building the social bonds that kept everyone alive. It was also the primary time for couples to be intimate and focus on reproduction, safely hidden away in the warm darkness. With the fire blazing brightly and many eyes watching the shadows, the tribe was perfectly protected from any predators prowling in the dark. Once the wood was fully restocked and the conversations faded, a natural wave of tiredness would wash over the camp once again. Your ancestors would simply lie back down on the dirt for their second sleep, resting peacefully until the morning sun finally rose. This incredibly successful two-shift sleep system worked perfectly. But it also created another strange biological quirk that you still experience in your life today. Have you ever wondered why you might naturally stay up until 2 in the morning, while your parents easily wake up at dawn? Modern society often labels night owls as lazy. But evolutionary biologists call this fascinating survival phenomenon the sentinel hypothesis. In a prehistoric environment, if an entire tribe of 50 people fell into a deep sleep at the exact same time, it was a disaster. They would be completely defenseless. A single hungry cave predator could easily wipe out the entire sleeping community in a matter of minutes. To survive, human biology evolved a brilliant defensive strategy: diverse chronotypes. We are genetically programmed to have completely different sleep schedules. In an ancient hunter-gatherer camp, the elderly grandparents would naturally fall asleep early and wake up long before the sun rose. Meanwhile, teenagers and young adults were biologically wired to stay up late, naturally taking over the crucial late-night protective fire watch. By naturally sleeping in large, mixed-age groups, our ancestors created a highly effective, overlapping security system that ran all night long. Researchers studying modern forager tribes found that out of a community of 30 people, someone is awake 99% of the time. There was almost never a single moment during the terrifying night when every single human in the camp was completely unconscious. This genetic variation kept your ancestors alive. The night owls protected the early birds, and the early birds protected the night owls. Your internal body clock is not just a random personal preference. It is a highly specialized survival tool forged in absolute darkness. So, if you feel miserable forcing yourself out of bed at 7 in the morning for modern school or a boring office job, understand that your biology is not broken at all. You are simply operating on a very different, very ancient survival shift. You were genetically built to be the trusted night guard of your tribe, keeping the fire alive while the others slept safely. For hundreds of thousands of years, this beautiful, interlocking system of segmented sleep kept humanity completely safe. Then, almost overnight, everything suddenly changed. The rapid invention of artificial light and the glowing electric bulb completely shattered our ancient, deeply biological relationship with the dark, natural world. We successfully banished the terrifying night, pushing back the shadows so effectively that a physical, protective campfire was no longer required for our survival. Following the Industrial Revolution, society demanded efficient, continuous labor. The segmented sleep of our ancestors was suddenly compressed into one single 8-hour block. This created a massive evolutionary mismatch. Your modern lifestyle has changed dramatically, but your genetic hardware is still running a prehistoric operating system. When you stare at the bright blue light of your smartphone late at night, you are completely confusing your deeply ancient biological clock. That artificial screen tricks your primitive brain into believing the sun is still shining, totally disrupting the natural release of your sleep hormones. And when you inevitably wake up at 2 in the morning, staring at the ceiling in complete panic, you assume you are broken. You desperately count the hours you have left to sleep, flooding your body with modern stress chemicals that make resting absolutely impossible. But evolutionary biology tells a very different story. Your brain is not malfunctioning, it is simply executing a highly successful, ancient survival code. That sudden midnight wakefulness is the exact same instinct that kept your ancestors from being eaten by saber-toothed cats in the freezing dark. So, how should you handle this ancient instinct in a modern world? The answer is to stop fighting your own deep evolutionary biology. The next time your eyes suddenly snap open in the middle of the night, do not panic and do not reach for your phone. As you lie there in the pitch black, feeling the cool air of your bedroom, remember the glowing embers of the prehistoric past. You do not have a sleep disorder. It is just your ancient ancestors gently waking you up to make sure the fire is still burning.